Now that we're familiar with the factors we look at when we consider areas for our retail location, we're going to dive a little deeper and talk about the specific site in which we want to locate our store. Let's say we've decided to operate our store in Milledgeville, Georgia. Milledgeville is a big place and there are lots of retail availability. So when we are looking for a very specific location within an area, there are some factors we have to consider. So we're going to look at some site characteristics that we use to determine whether or not we're going to locate our store. The first is traffic flow, and accessibility goes along with traffic flow. Traffic flow is the number of vehicles and pedestrians that pass by the specific site. And traffic flow is much more important for establishments that anticipate impulse purchases or frequent purchases. So a fast food restaurant is going to want a very high level of traffic flow because they want people, lots of cars driving by with hopes that they'll stop for a quick bite to eat. Now, traffic flow is not as important for destination type establishments. So a bridal store that sells bridal gowns, right, does not need a high level of traffic flow because if someone's in the market for a bridal gown, they're going to seek out that store. They don't need to just be driving by. So traffic flow, how do we measure that? How do we understand what the level of traffic is at a specific area? We can actually look at the Department of Transportation website and get some general traffic count data. And so traffic counts are measured by a 24-hour timetable. So it could be a little bit difficult to truly count traffic during business hours, but this does get us very close. And there are companies that provide this data in a little more detail that retailers have access to when they're looking into retail location information. So vehicular traffic, we can look that up. We can get that information, see how many cars are driving by a specific area in a specific day. In terms of accessibility, this is the ease with which customers can get into and out of your site. Accessibility is greater for sites near major highways and at streets with traffic lights and turn lanes. I'm sure you guys have all tried to turn left into a retail establishment where there's no traffic light and it takes forever, and it can get very frustrating. Or turn out of a parking lot where there's no traffic light, and so you have to wait for a break in traffic, and that can get frustrating to a shopper. So retailers sometimes look for locations that are right by a traffic light or where they can be accessed by a quick right turn. That way it's easy to be accessible. Another consideration with accessibility would be natural barriers. So this could be rivers or mountains. So is there a river that runs through the city that people have to cross over in order to get to your store? Now, I know there are roads that go over rivers, but sometimes those barriers can inhibit people from getting to your location. Divided highways and railroad tracks can also stop customers from entering your location, so retailers look for those. Let's think about Milledgeville for a second and think about 441 Columbia, so the main road going in and out of town. Consider the stores that want to be on the right side of the road. All right, if you think about the average person who is working in downtown Milledgeville, a lot of those people live north of town up by the Kroger, and so they drive into work every morning. And so what retailers are located on the right side of the road? Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts are both located on the right-hand side of 441, and that's to capture early morning traffic as people are driving to work. You can turn right into the parking lot, get your coffee, turn right out of the parking lot, and keep going to work. Think about the stores that are on the other side of the road. So when you're coming out of traffic, what's most accessible? That's where we see our Wendy's, our Firehouse Subs, our stacked sandwiches. So it's all the retail stores that might have dinner options for people leaving town. So retailers do focus on accessibility and traffic flow to help evaluate site locations. So traffic flow and accessibility, those are the first factors that we use when we are looking at a specific site. So we want to try to get access to major highways, avoid street congestion, and look for an availability of mass transit. The second site factor that we look at is parking. So the amount of parking and the quality of parking can affect a consumer's decision on where to shop. And so there's a general rule of thumb that retailers use when they're trying to determine how much parking they need. The rule of thumb is a ratio based on square footage, and the ratio says that you need 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of store space. Okay, so this becomes pretty important because if you are locating in a shopping center where there are multiple retail stores, you want to make sure that there's at least 5 spaces per 1,000 square foot of retail space available for you. So you need to make sure the parking lot is big enough to accommodate all of these retail stores in the shopping center. Supermarkets and full-line discount stores actually do it's recommended that you have about 10 to 15 spaces for every 1,000 square foot of retail space. And so that's why we see parking lots at places like Kroger or Target or Walmart tend to be very, very large. Another thing to consider with your parking is, do you have places for your employees to park? So that 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet ratio is for your customers. So you also need to make sure there's enough space for your employees and that they're not parking or taking up customer parking spots. A couple more site characteristics to look at. Visibility is one. Visibility refers to the customer's ability to see your location from the street. And good visibility is necessary for new retail establishments or establishments who are anticipating a lot of travelers passing through. Think about the Firehouse Subs in Milledgeville. It's tucked back into a shopping center off the road. And if you're driving by, it's very difficult to see. If you don't know it's there, you're probably going to miss it. There are other food retailers like Wendy's who are right on the side of the road and make it easy for consumers to see them. So visibility is an important factor. Adjacent tenants is a very important factor as well. You want to know who your neighbors are going to be if you're operating in a shopping center, a planned shopping center. There's a theory of cumulative attractiveness in retailing, and it states that a cluster of similar retailing activities have drawing power. And so it's going to bring customers into that shopping center. So if you look at this shopping center sign that's up here on the right-hand side of your screen, within this power center, there's a Target, TJ Maxx, Barnes & Nobles, Michaels, Old Navy, World Market, and Meijer. So people who shop at Target are also likely to shop at TJ Maxx, Michaels, and Old Navy, etc. And so if you can stop in one shopping center and get all of your shopping done for the day, that's a lot easier than driving to multiple places. So if you have good adjacent tenants, it's going to help with the cumulative attractiveness and potentially draw even more people into your retail location. The last factor that we consider when we evaluate site locations are the restrictions and costs. There are a couple of different restrictions and costs that I want to bring your attention to. The first is zoning. Zoning is the regulation of construction and the use of buildings in certain areas of a municipality. And so zoning laws and zoning restrictions can state whether undeveloped areas can be used for commercial or residential use or both. So you'll often see land that's for sale and it says it's zoned commercial. So that means you can put a retail store there. You cannot put a retail store in a residentially zoned area. So you can't just open a McDonald's in the middle of a neighborhood or start selling product out of your home. If you're going to be a retail establishment, you have to be in a commercially zoned area. There are also building codes that you have to consider, and these are legal restrictions that specify the type of buildings and signs, the size and type of parking lot that you can have. They determine what a historical district might be, among other things. So in Milledgeville, there is a nationally registered historic district, and so there are very specific guidelines on what you can do to the building and how you can hang signs, if you can hang signs. And so you have to follow those if you live in that area. I mentioned this earlier, but in Milledgeville, you also have to apply to use a sandwich board sign outside of your business. And so on the right-hand side of the screen here is a snip from that application that gives you the building code restrictions for sandwich boards in downtown. So zoning, building codes, and then the last restriction you have to worry about are licenses. Licensing is different in just about every city. And the most common type of business license is an alcohol license or a liquor license. And so this is the Milledgeville, City of Milledgeville alcoholic beverage license. And it kind of gives you an idea of what you have to pay in order to be able to sell alcohol in your retail store. And so if you're opening a new retail location, you first have to apply for the license, and then of course you have to pay for the fees that are involved as well. And so those factors can impact where you're going to locate your retail site. So we've looked at a couple of site factors. We've looked at traffic flow, accessibility, parking, visibility, adjacent tenants, and restrictions and costs. So these all are very important when selecting a retail site. One other thing I want to talk about in this lecture is inside a shopping center. We've talked about where to locate within the town, but let's say that you are trying to locate within a shopping mall or a lifestyle center or a power center. Is there anything you need to consider when you are choosing a storefront within a shopping center? The answer is, of course, yes. So there are some types of retailers that prefer to be closer to the anchor store, and other types of retailers that prefer to locate away from the anchor store. So I want you to think about that, and we're going to talk about it in the discussion board for Chapter 8. But I want you to consider what types of retailers would choose to locate close to the anchor store and why. I also want you to consider what types of retailers want to be away from the anchor store and why. So I have two examples up here, a flower shop and a shoe repair shop. So you can use those to start the discussion on the discussion boards.